Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. Everybody wanted to, the progressives have a huge, a wonderful, a great set of programs and things that we want to execute in order to make things right, in order to recover all that was lost over the last several decades. Remember, supply-side economics has decimated, let me repeat, supply-side economics has decimated the middle class. A lot of people don't quite see it that way, but when you look at the charts, when you look at the numbers, you cannot help but say the reality is supply-side economics decimated the middle class. So how is that mitigated? How do we solve the problems? Well, a lot of people talk about, we don't have the money to do this, we don't have the money to do that. There is an economics theory known as a modern monetary theory that not a lot of people want to talk about because what I call it is the great equalizer. And what I mean by the great equalizer is right now our economic money supply and all these sort of things are controlled in such a manner that it only supports the plutocracy. It only supports the plutocracy. And what we intend to do, what we want to do, is expose this theory that they are ridiculing it. Many folks are intent on ridiculing it for one specific reason. And the reason they are, there we go again, and the reason they are trying to malign it is because they know it changes, it shifts the power. So a few, at the St. Louis Netroots Nation, I met Arliss Bunny. That's a pseudonym because she's a physicist and business owner and all these other things. I met this great woman, right? She's, like I said, a physicist, and we got into talking. We went out to dinner and started to talk about different theories and the economy, etc. And finally, I was so intrigued that I said, you know what? We need to do a show with you, have you on air to talk about modern economic theory. And would you do it? She said, oh, absolutely. In fact, I want to do it. So let's go ahead and get busy with the show. The title of the show today is Understand Modern Monetary Theory, MMT. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is right on that too. Remember, a lot of people are once again ridiculing Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez because she came out and said, when they said, well, how are you going to pay for all of this? One of the things she always says, how comes you never ask how we're going to pay for war? How comes you never ask how we're going to bail out the banks? How come you never ask what does quantitative easing really mean? And I ask all of you guys to look that up. Quantitative easing is the way we've done things for quite a while. And who was it helping mostly? It helps the bankers. And of course, when the bankers get help, the expectation is a few crumbs trickle down to us. So that's the title of the show. Understand Modern Monetary Theory, MMT. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is right on that too. Subtitle, We Cannot Allow the Status Quo to Keep the Poor and Middle Class Down. Modern monetary theory will bring us a world where we can all prosper. Today's show is significant for a particular reason. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has ignited the right and many in the establishment Democratic Party with her support for modern monetary theory to support a grand progressive agenda. In short, we can afford it if we adjust our economic model for humanity instead of one for the support of a plutocracy, an oligarchy, and to some extent, fascists. And I mean that. This interview with Arliss Bunny that I conducted in St. Louis at the Netroots Nation conference is extremely informative. Make sure it is shared widely. Arliss Bunny is a progressive rabbit American. That's, it's I guess because she uses a pseudonym again because of a professional nature of certain things. Okay, and economics wonk, and she makes fun out of it. She's the author of the well-reviewed ebook, The Smart Bunny's Guide to Debt, Deficit, and Austerity, which is being used as a textbook at the university level as an introduction to modern monetary theory. Arliss has 2 more Smart Bunny books due out this fall. The Smart Bunny's Guide to the Federal Reserve and The Smart Bunny's Guide to Social Security. Arliss also has her own weekly radio program and podcast, Hoppin' Mad with Will McLeod and Arliss Bunny, airing on Netroots Radio at 8 a.m. on Mondays or via podcast on Stitcher, iTunes, and Google Play. You can reach Arliss on Twitter as at Arliss Bunny or at I'm Hoppin' Mad. Her personal motto is politics, economics, and carrots. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and get started with that, playing that, because like I said, it is a very, very important topic, and she explains it very well. I think most of your questions will be answered. If you have any questions, be sure to put it inside of the little note there, and we'll be sure to get them answered. If I can't answer them specifically, I know quite a bit of economics, but if for some reason you stump me, I will definitely get back with Arliss, and we'll talk about that on the other side. So without further ado, let's get busy.
Today I have a very special guest. Her name is Arliss Bunny. And yes, I really mean that is the name she goes by. Anyhow, let me tell you a little bit about Arliss. First of all, we were out there at Netroots Nation in St. Louis, Missouri. And as you know, there's a Netroots Nation radio that is it's a constant out there. And I met Will, and then I met Arliss Bunny. She has a great show on the station, and you know what? She's very smart, and she knows money, and she knows our economy. I tell you what, I went out to have dinner with her, and it turns out that I learned quite a bit. I learned so much that I decided that instead of doing the show that we're going to have today, we wanted to make sure that we had a show specifically with Arliss Bunny. And who is Arliss Bunny? Arliss Bunny is a progressive rabbit American and economics wonk. He is the author of the well-reviewed ebook, The Smart Bunny Guides to Debt, Deficit, and Austerity, which is being used as a textbook at the university level as an introduction to modern monetary theory. Arliss has 2 more Smart Bunny books due out this fall. The Smart Bunny's Guide to the Federal Reserve and The Smart Bunny's Guide to Social Security. Arliss also has her own weekly radio program and podcast. It's called Hoppin' Mad with Will McLeod and Arliss Bunny, airing on Netroots Radio at 8 a.m. on Mondays or via podcast on Stitcher, iTunes, and Google Play. You can reach Arliss on Twitter as Arliss Bunny or at LM Hoppin' Mad. I think it means I am hoppin' mad. Her personal motto is politics, economics, carrot. Interesting. Welcome to Politics Done Right. Should I call you Miss Bunny or should I just call you Arliss Bunny?
Arliss is fine.
Well, but before I get started, Arliss, folks, this is real. This is just somebody that goes by her pseudonym for whatever reasons necessary. But I tell you what, you're in for a treat. You're in to learn quite a bit today. Arliss, how are you doing today?
I'm great. And I always start out, when I start out talking about modern monetary theory, I always start out by saying that I know most people don't sit up late into the night reading books on monetary policy. Most people aren't compelled by monetary policy and find it really interesting. But if your passion is the environment, or if your passion is national infrastructure, or clean energy, or healthcare, or social security, if those things matter to you, then you need to get involved in evangelizing the truth about monetary policy, because this is the one thing that has the power to change everything else. Because you will never, ever have to listen again to someone say, we can't afford that. If this country could wrap its head around modern monetary theory, we're done with that. We're done with that as an excuse.
Now,
And that empowers us more than anything else we could do.
when I was first, I had heard about this just in passing. I think I heard about MMT during I think Rand Paul. I think they study some other kind of economics known as, I think, the Austrian economics, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, the Austrian school.
Yeah,
Right.
the Austrian school. So in studying these different economic models, I actually went ahead and just kind of took a cursory look at it. But as far as in detail, I never took it seriously because you know what kind of an economy we have here, and it's very hard to talk to people about these issues. But after speaking to you, you made it so simple that I thought it was necessary for us to take it on a bit more in detail. So first of all, why don't you tell us exactly what modern monetary theory is?
Well, first of all, whoever named it badly.
Right.
It isn't, modern monetary theory isn't actually a theory. Modern monetary theory is observational. And my actual PhD is in physics from MIT. I'm a science wonk. And there's a difference between things that are observational and things that are simply, theories, things we're working to establish. Modern monetary theory simply tells you how the economy works. You can do with that as you will. In other words, you can use it if you are a conservative Republican, you can use it in that way. If you are a progressive, liberal Democrat or progressive liberal independent, you can use it in that way. In other words, it is not a politically founded or based or biased way of looking at the economy. It's simply observational, but it is incredibly powerful, and it is so different from what you have been taught or what you learned, and there's a reason for that. I learned economics, and most economics professors out there learned economics from people who were taught economics before the end of the gold standard. In other words, in 1972, the Nixon shock, the United States went off the gold standard, and we went to a sovereign fiat floating currency.
Let me stop you right there and ask you specifically, because a lot of people, they hear these things about the gold standard, and they hear the right-wing folks trying to sell gold as being the way to prevent us from some cataclysmic event. So tell us exactly what you mean when you say we are no longer on the gold standard.
Okay, it used to be that the dollar was based on actual gold we kept in Fort Knox. And a dollar could be remitted for, a physical paper dollar could be remitted for a given amount of gold. And that is no longer the case. We became a fiat currency. And what fiat means is because I say so. That's literally what fiat means. It means because I say so. And the fiat currency of the United States, the dollar, is simply and only based on the full faith and credit of the United States. And let me add a little note here. That's why when the Republicans talk about not paying our debts, when the Republicans want to back off of, and do things like, shut down the federal government and threaten to not pay back the people who hold our treasuries, they are messing with the full faith and credit of the United States. They're not just messing with us for a day. That's the entire basis of our currency. It's an incredibly, massively, much bigger thing than they would have you believe. So as bad as you thought it was when Republicans try to do that, it's worse.
Explain.
Because a fiat currency only exists because I said so. So if the Republicans want to unsay so, if they just want to decide one day frivolously to not pay U.S. debt, then because I say so no longer means anything.
So in effect,
and very popular this week, the concept, the phrase, your word is your bond.
Right.
We've heard that a little bit this week. But that is what fiat means. It means your word is your bond. And if you break that bond, you've broken that bond.
And in other words, you've set a precedence. At first, given that it was never done before, people believe in the faith of our currency and that it'll always be there and it'll always be backed by the U.S. government. Once a precedence is set not to do so, at that point, you're up in the air, right? Maybe you'll get paid, maybe you won't. And at that point, maybe some other currency becomes the reserve currency of the world.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly how dangerous it is.
Now, now that you've explained what fiat currency is, what kind of implications, or what do you see as implications within our economy that reality has? Let's start now from a political point of view. What does that mean if we were ever to accept the reality of MMT, modern monetary theory?
Well, here's the simplest way to say it. It is not the job of the federal government to balance the budget, ever. It is the job of the federal government to balance the economy, the real economy. In other words, how it's really working. The economy has think of it as three smokestacks. It has, or three sort of aspects to a teeter-totter, a three-sided teeter-totter. There's the public sector, which is the federal government. Mm-hmm. There is, and by the way, that does not include state or city governments, because state or city governments are not monetary sovereigns. In other words, they can't print their own money.
Right, that's why they have to have balanced budgets, right?
Yes, that's right. And that's what makes state and city governments different. That's what makes a state or city government like your family checkbook.
Right.
But the federal government is nothing like your family checkbook. And every time the federal government, every time anyone, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. Every time anyone tries to sell you on that, they're selling you a lie. The federal government isn't anything like your family because the federal government controls the printing press.
Absolutely.
So the trick is there are three sectors in the economy. There's the private, the private, which is you and me and corporations. It's all the money that's floating around domestically in the private sector. There's the public sector, that's the federal government. And there's the international sector, everyone else. Always, no matter what, the math is such that those sectors have to balance out to zero. So if a dollar is in the public sector, in other words, if the federal government has it, it's a dollar that isn't in the private sector and isn't in the international sector.
Okay.
So here's the thing to wrap your head around, because this is the really big thing that's going to blow your mind. What do your taxes pay for? Your taxes don't pay for anything ever. Not ever. It's not possible. Here's why. When the Federal Reserve spends a dollar out into the economy, in other words, when Congress releases money to be spent out into the economy through fiscal policy, and the Federal Reserve issues money out into the economy, whether it's done by pixels, in other words, whether it's done on a computer screen or whether it's done with a physical dollar, a physical piece of paper, that money goes onto the federal ledger as a liability. When it comes back in taxes, when you pay that money back as a tax, it zeroes out the liability, right?
Right.
So money is created when it gets spent by the public sector into the private sector or into the international sector.
Right.
But when it comes back from one of those two sectors, it is destroyed. It zeroes out.
Absolutely.
Every dime the federal government spends is new money every single time.
That is important for people to understand. I mean, but here's one issue that I have, Arliss. It's a very important issue. You just gave a perfect description using balance sheets and debits, credits, and liabilities, etc. Unfortunately, right. You are a person, you understand finance.
Yeah, I'm a numbers person.
Exactly. You're a physicist, PhD in physics. You understand all of this. What is very difficult is for the regular American citizen to understand that, because when you have people that these guys trust, their own politicians, come out and tell them that the budget needs to be balanced and tell them that they can treat the federal budget as they'll treat the mom and pop's budget. To them, that sounds real. What you're saying does not. By the way, I understand that it's real and I'm capable to understand the entire concept. How do we migrate, or how do we change folks' minds who have been lied to from the inception of the country, to put it bluntly?
Well, and certainly since 1972,
right?
Certainly since the end of the gold standard, and
right.
It is extremely difficult. It is why I own a manufacturing company, right? I already work 60 hours a week. I don't need to do this. I don't need to do what I'm doing right now, and I don't need to do my show for a living. I do it because this is that important. Getting this word out and talking about this is that important because it empowers. It's the engine for everything else that we as progressives want to put into play. And the thing about it is, think of it as a teeter-totter. So if you have money that is sitting in the federal government, and so that end of the teeter-totter is low because that's where the weight is sitting. And then the federal government slides that money out into the private sector. So now the private sector end of the economy is low. And the federal government has debt, right? They have high debt. They're up in the air. When the money comes back, the teeter-totter slides again. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. Where is money valuable?
Money is well. I mean, if you were to ask me where is money valuable, it is when I'm spending it. Money is valuable in the
exactly
that I'm using.
That's right. Money is only valuable when it's out in the private sector or the international sector. It's only valuable when it's circulating and being useful. And by the way, the reason that things are so out of balance and so screwed up now is because money is not being spent. It is trapped at the top of this economy. The 1% have that money trapped. It's not that there's not enough money in the private sector. It's that you and I don't have it. That's the problem. Not moving around.
I want to kind of touch on that because it is rather important, and a lot of people don't see it. We have people that continuously tell us that we must somehow make life easier for those on top, so that their income or so that the money would trickle down from them. If they start to make a whole lot of money, somehow it actually trickles down. But the reality is they cannot spend monies the way that the average American person will spend it. In economic terms, it's called the marginal propensity to consume, right? The marginal propensity to consume of the lower classes is a lot higher.
If you wanted to light this economy on fire, you know what you do? You double Social Security payments tomorrow.
Absolutely so. What we know is that all we've been told about making things easy for the rich, those are all things that in reality hurts the economy. Why don't you explain?
Let me explain that. Okay, I own a manufacturing company. We build a consumer good. So let's start by saying I don't hire people and I don't make more goods just because I have more money. I make more goods when the market demands it of me, and I hire people when I absolutely cannot continue on without hiring somebody. And that's true for every business in this country. Right. Nobody hires just because suddenly the government has lowered their tax burden. That's not the way it works.
The reality is,
it is a bottom up. It is always bottom up. It can only be bottom up. And your listeners all know that. It's completely logical. The only people that don't know that are, the people who have an investment in preventing us from operating that way.
Well, at first of all, I want to just kind of correct one thing that I think you said. And that is, you're saying that they don't know it. I think they well know what they're doing. It is just not in their interest, in my opinion at least, to do otherwise. Because our politicians are not dumb. Our business folks, our Wall Street folks, I think those are some of the most intelligent folks around. They've just found a way to make money from money. And that is why, and in effect, I think that's what we're looking at here, right? Having these tax breaks, having these laws that give these guys preferential treatment actually means they can create instruments to make money off of money instead of taking the risk that you as a business owner have taken with the company that you own, or any other business person who's out there taking real risks with the business they own. I mean, I want to bring up, and this is sort of a little bit sort of tangential, but something that always got to me was student loans and how before pre-Obamacare, and it's amazing that I'm saying pre-Obamacare because believe it or not, Obamacare also had something to do with student loans. But it turns out that pre-Obamacare, when you took out a federally insured student loan, you were loaned the money by a private bank. If you decided that you were not going to pay the bill, in other words, if you defaulted on your student loan, that bank was taking no risk. They are completely and entirely reimbursed by whom? All of us, the government. So the bank had no risk, and yet they were charging high interest rates. These are laws created in such a manner that transfer our wealth to the top, the lenders, the bankers. And now explaining what, Arliss, you're talking about, again, we're making laws that restrict the lower classes, restrict the middle classes from able to move on. And you say?
I mean, the best thing you could do for me, the best thing the federal government could do for me as a manufacturer is increase the minimum wage to $15, because frankly, I already pay more than that to my people.
Right.
And if everybody did that, then more people can afford to buy my product.
Absolutely.
It's nothing but net for me.
Absolutely. So let's, we discussed MMT, monetary, I'm getting old. The modern monetary theory. We discussed that previously, and we looked at it from a political standpoint. And what I'd like to now talk about it in the economic domain, because we speak about it in those generalities. There are some theories that say if you were to implement, as you said, in other words, based on on MMT, what we could easily do is we could forgive all student loans right now. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And without raising taxes. Is that correct?
Right.
Would that be inflationary according to
here's why.
Economic model? People
fear inflation, and part of that is because we had such a disaster in the 70s.
Right.
But that was driven by other things, and is so unlikely to ever happen again. And I'll talk about that in a second. But inflation is, we all are afraid that inflation is easy, that it could sneak up on us on cat's paws and we wouldn't notice it coming.
Right.
And by the way, the Federal Reserve has, half of its employees are busy watching for inflation with, telescopes. They're watching for it from miles and miles away. But inflation is actually very, very difficult to achieve. Ask Japan. They've been trying to get to inflation for something like 15 years, and they can't get there.
Right. In fact, Japan has a negative interest rate, as I recall.
Yes, Japan and Switzerland.
Oh, Switzerland does as well?
Yeah. Didn't
know that.
And they do it for a different set of reasons. They're just trying to get people to not store money there. But the thing about taxes, and the thing about, let's talk about inflation first, because that's the subject that we're on. There are constraints. In other words, you cannot just spend infinite amounts of money. The constraints on our economy, though, is not inflation. We're taught that that's inflation because that's what the Federal Reserve talks about.
Right.
What constrains our economy is unemployment and industrial capacity, an extreme trade deficit, and then it could be inflation if somebody did everything wrong, but chances of that are really pretty minimal. But the thing about it is that, ask yourself, what drives inflation?
When there's scarcity, we get inflation, and
that's right.
So
it isn't too many dollars.
Right.
It isn't the amount of money that's circulating in the economy. It's scarcity. Exactly what you just said. It's supply and demand.
Right. And
it used to be that we were constrained by our borders, essentially. That international trade was complex. And now goods and people and services flow across this globe in a matter of, if it's goods, in a matter of a day or two, Amazon Prime, and in
yes.
And in terms of services, think of every time you pick up the phone and need tech support and you're talking to someone in Pakistan.
Right.
It is, goods and services are no longer constrained by our domestic economy.
Right.
So the chance of getting of having a limitation, the chance of the constraint on goods and services coming into play now is extremely difficult to achieve. The whole world basically would have to go to that place. It would be very, very hard.
Absolutely.
Which is Japan's problem.
Right. And it is sort of silly also, right? Because if you look at, I always said that our current economy is not a real economy, or it's not an efficient economy. Capitalism was supposed to be defined as the efficient movement of labor, resources, or I don't remember exactly how it's put, the efficient allocation of resources, and it hasn't turned out that way, right? If the efficient allocation is not there, we have a lot of roads to build right now. We have a lot of bridges to build. We have a whole lot of people that are uneducated. We have a whole lot of things that need doing, and we have a whole lot of people waiting for work.
And here's the thing. We could sit down with the conservatives, with the Tea Party. We could sit down with them and say, okay, let's eliminate the income tax, or let's eliminate the payroll tax. And in trade for that, we want this much money spent on fill in the blank.
Right.
And then create the money by fiat. And when we create that money by fiat at the Fed, it's literally pixels. And here's the other thing to keep in mind that modern monetary theory really prioritizes. In this financialized economy, in this financialized world economy, we have all been taught, it has been pounded into us mercilessly, that the important thing is the balance sheet. The important thing is people.
Right.
When we are making pixels that are fiat money, pixels that are only important because we say they're important, when we make that more important than people, we have lost our way. And the point of modern monetary theory is we don't have to do it that way ever anymore. We can just say no.
Arliss, why don't you tell us what's the purpose of taxes?
In terms of currency, the only real value in taxes, the thing that it must do is what's called drive currency, because otherwise you and I could be paying each other and everything, the entire economy could be running on carrots. Carrot coins, my personal favorite currency, everything could be running on carrot coin, but it doesn't because the federal government requires that taxes be paid in dollars. So you and I have to earn dollars and have dollars in order to be able to pay the federal government. So basically, the job of taxes, the work that taxes do in the economy, is create a market for themselves. And by doing that, it gives the government a lever that they can use on the economy. And here's the thing, taxes can and should play an important role. Taxes should be a constraint, but they should be a constraint only when we need them to be. In other words, if the economy is heating up too much, then you tax some money out of the economy if you need to. But also, taxes can be used to drive behavior.
Right.
So for instance, that's the reason that there are what we call sin taxes. Mm-hmm. But you can also use taxes to do things like, if you are on the 1%, and you are not using money. In other words, it's just sitting somewhere in an investment or in diamonds or in gold or whatever you've decided to invest in, and it's just sitting still. It's not circulating and driving value into the economy. Then that gets taxed at a higher rate. Or if your income is XYZ, it gets taxed at a higher rate. That kind of thing is a value in taxes. In other words, that it is creating what we need to see in the economy. And it is rewarding the behaviors that we want to see and disincentivizing the behaviors that we don't want to see. So in that way, taxes can be a valuable arm for the federal government. But other than that, taxes do no other work that we need them to do. So we don't need a payroll tax at all.
That sounds very hard to grasp at this point. We don't need a payroll tax. And I know the answer, but I have to get the answer for our audience. We don't need a payroll tax, meaning nobody's going to pay into Social Security, but when they are retired, whatever age we decide retirement age is, they will get a check from we the people, the government.
Right. Exactly.
Now explain to folks why that works.
Because we can just fiat that money. In other words, it's from the federal government's side, from the Fed's side. It's just pixels on a screen.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, Alan Greenspan he testified in the House in Paul Ryan's committee. And Paul Ryan tried to say, yeah, but we have to have these taxes to pay our bills. And Alan Greenspan said, no, that's not the way it works. Taxes come in and they disappear.
Yeah, right.
That's not and he's sitting there explaining it to Paul Ryan about 10 different ways. So when we think that the Fed isn't understanding what I'm talking about right now, no, the Fed understands this completely. It's how they work. That's why I say modern monetary theory is observational. The Fed doesn't have to call it modern monetary theory. They just know it's the way it works because it's the way it works.
It almost seems to me like, based on what we're talking here, we could actually eliminate that step, the Feds altogether, right?
The Federal Reserve performs an important function in that they, first of all, very important, they are independent of the government. And I know people talk about auditing the Fed and more federal control of the Fed. You don't want that, folks. You really don't. An independent Fed that's able to step back outside of politics is very, very important. It doesn't mean that we can't require them to provide data and verifiable data that they're doing their job properly. But it does mean that we need to keep them out of the political fray because you do not want your central banker to be a political position.
Now, should we have private banks as part of the as the Federal Reserve, though?
I think that we should as part of it. I simply think that small business and individuals and not-for-profit, organizations, all of those ought to be part of it as well.
Okay, good. That I can live with that. It's just that when we're talking about regular big private banks having an inordinate influence there, I think that is problematic.
Yeah. What is interesting is that the Fed has gotten the message. If I know you all don't follow like the Minneapolis Fed and the St. Louis Fed on Twitter, but Atlanta Fed on Twitter, I do. And it is fascinating because the various regional Federal Reserves have gotten considerably more attentive to first of all, they're paying a great deal more attention to unemployment than they are to inflation, which is relatively new in the Federal Reserve's priorities. But also, they're paying much more attention to the kinds of things that we as progressives are concerned about. The environment, the crop diversity. You see statements coming out of these Federal Reserve banks, these individual regional Federal Reserve banks, valuing these things that we have been talking about for years and years and years. They're getting the message, which some of them, not all of them, Texas, you can, know, but Minneapolis in particular, follow them on Twitter. They're fascinating.
I'm going to try doing that. For everything that you've said here, sounded great. I think you have it. The data is irrefutable. Why is it that both on the campaign and both in our daily news, when they're speaking about the economy faltering, when they're speaking about there not being enough money to pay Social Security, et cetera, why is it that we are allowing our policy to be made on false information on our economy?
I think it's very hard. It's like turning around an ocean liner. It's very, very hard to completely change the framing of something. And I think 1972 seems like a long time ago, but in terms of changing the entire framework of the way people think about money, it isn't that long ago. And what has happened is that once modern monetary theory kind of started getting underway in the late 80s and early 90s and has sort of grown and spread since that time, a lot of young economists are learning about it. But it is, for instance, Bernie Sanders hired for the Senate Budget Committee for the minority. He hired the chief economist to Senate Budget Committee is a woman who is one of the leaders in modern monetary theory, Dr. Stephanie Kelton, and he got her from University of Missouri at Kansas City, which is the leading MMT program in the world, and put her into Senate Budget. That's incredibly important. So, and MMT has been mentioned in the Wall Street Journal. It's been mentioned in the New York Times. It's been mentioned in the Financial Times. It's starting to get more leverage as more and more people look at it, hear about it, look at it and think, oh, of course. Oh, it has to be that way.
Right.
It couldn't be another way. And even somebody like Alan Greenspan, who wouldn't be caught dead calling it modern monetary theory, still speaks about it in this way. So it is gaining a foothold. And I think we're just one generation of economists behind in seeing modern monetary theory really step out of the shadows. We can push it forward more as progressives and faster if we start making noise about it.
Well, look, Arliss Bunny, it was my pleasure to have you on my show, Politics Done Right. I hope to have you on again. Folks, out in the blog, you can find a list of the books that Arliss has been talking about. They are incredible. So we are going to have them on our site and elsewhere as well. So Arliss, it was my pleasure to have you on board.
Carrots to you and yours.
Yes, ma'am, and I'll eat them all.
Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed Arliss Bunny. We had fun in St. Louis. She really knows her stuff. And again, I always said the following, and I don't mean this to be a pejorative to business people or to MBAs or people who have business degrees, but the theory of education is different for different professions. If you are an engineer or a scientist, you are generally more objective in that you look at X plus Y and it comes out with a fixed number. When we're talking about economics and people in business, one of the things you learn is how to, and this is how it's taught, right? What you've actually learned is how to maximize to profit whatever enterprise that you're with. You don't have a big picture in mind. You have how to make that entity that you are controlling the best. What's the best for that one entity isn't necessarily the best for society, isn't necessarily the best for everything else. So it's not a pejorative to say one of the things is that I generally accept information. I generally read information, more things that can be mathematically proven, more things that has value in math and science. Telling me that, okay, the stock market may go up, or what's the intrinsic value of something, that really means nothing, right? Because it's the whim of the day. Now, when it comes to economics is sort of a blend, right? The math is absolute, human nature is not. So when she said things like using taxes to control people's behavior, we know that is an absolute. Why? I mean, we can tax you till we can tax you no more if we want to stop you from smoking a cigarette. So if we say we make sure that cigarette is greater than X percentage, we know that you can't afford it, so you won't use it. Of course, that doesn't apply to the very few wealth that we have. Now, that said, modern monetary policy, while some people will say, oh, that is pie in the sky, we have to realize that when we got out of the 2008 crisis, in effect, we were using modern monetary policy. They won't say that because they only use these processes. They only use these techniques, these technologies, if you will, these monetary technologies, these economic technologies to help the business people, the business sector. It is never done to help otherwise. Notice that in as much as credit was locked up in 2009, the government stepped in, they created money, they created quantitative easing, and they solved the problem for the business people. Now we have a whole lot of Americans hurting. We have a lot of Americans that need more cash, that needs more to go to school. We have a generation of kids right now that are in such hawk with the bankers, with the banksters, not bankers, with the banksters, that they cannot afford to buy a home, that they cannot afford to buy a car, that they are back home living with mom and dad, that they cannot see the same kind of upward mobility that most of the people, the baby boom generation and the Gen X generation have seen. And why is that? That is because of the extractive economy we created in such a manner that we have robbed them, that we have stolen from them. And now we come up and say, well, you know what? We have a way to solve that problem, man. We can actually bring in this thing called modern monetary theory. But no, the businessman is afraid now because his appreciation of his stocks will no longer occur at the rates that it occur based on the current economic model that these guys run on. Oh, we can use modern monetary theory to solve a whole lot of problems. Do they want it? No, they don't. Why? Because suddenly what that means is that the delta between the haves and the have-nots drop, and that appreciation that they can get in their stocks because everybody is chasing it is no longer there. That is what it's all about. It's the hypocrisy of wealth. Me only. Me only. Before I go on, I'm late to this, but please, folks, please remember this is a call-in show, but as well, this is a show that needs your support. This is Politics Done Right, a progressive show, an independent show, independent media that comes out and give you info that you're not going to get anywhere because it is not in the interest of the folks who control it all to give you this information. And you know what? When Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez came up and talked about MMT, every single scientist came out. Every single economist came out against it. Oh my God, even our friend Kruger, he came out. He didn't come out against it. What he said, we could get inflation, right? Arliss handled that. And in another blog that I did, I also said that. You get inflation when you have money chasing wealth. When you have money, products chasing money. We have, the other way around. So anyhow, listen to what Arliss has said. But anyway, please go ahead and go to patreon.com/politicsdoneright. Again, that is patreon.com/politicsdoneright. Now, Danielle Ledoux is saying, sounds more like jealousy of wealth. No. Let me back up. And folks, please take this the way I really mean it. I could be as wealthy as most, based on the product that I designed and the company that I formed. I made the conscious effort to give it up for political activism because it's not enough for a few to have it, because ultimately the pitchforks will come. There are some of us who have to do the right thing. Thank you, Alan Parker, who says, MMT solves resource. Alan Parker, you're absolutely right. MMT solves scarcity of resources. Because here's the funny thing about it, Alan. There really isn't scarcity. CP elevated. Maybe capitalism will still fuel neoliberalism, but MMT doesn't replace capitalism. It's a stopgap. There will be crisis. Look, we are not, the truth of the matter is I don't believe in capitalism. I think capitalism is really an evil enterprise. I love free enterprise, meaning the freedom to do things. Capitalism has no heart, no soul. We know that by definition. And that is not saying something bad or good. That is just saying how it is. Capitalism says the efficient allocation of resources, which means if we have to kill to make sure the resources are allocated efficiently, that is what happens, right? So it has no morals, it has nothing. Government is what gives capitalism morality. But my contention is capitalism and government are always in a constant fight, right? I want to kill. Government says, no, don't kill, don't kill, don't kill, don't kill. That is where we're at. Now, folks, please, if you really, really want to make sure that we move forward, and thank you, Alan Parker, for your smart words, CP Elevated as well, Alan Parker, Daniel Lado, as usual, it's not about jealousy. Now, again, I always tell people, when I speak, because of certain reasons, certain factors, many people say, oh, you just want something for nothing. Please look up Willie's Computer Software Company, okay? That is my company. That is a company that I let go down so that I could become a complete political activist. I pretty much let it die for this. It's not a joke, okay? It's not a joke. I really believe in this. We have to make a change in the country. We must make a change in the country. Now, please, folks, please go to patreon.com/politicsdoneright. Again, that is patreon.com/politicsdoneright, and support the program. I need 1,000 more subscribers, low-cost subscribers. I need 1,000 subscribers. We need to keep this viable. Make it that I made the right choice, because I am out there going, and this network, we are going to make changes. We are going to be some of the folks that are out there making changes. Go through our website and see all the folks that we've spoken to. Go through the website and see all the knowledge that we put out there. Go through the website and see what we're doing. And this didn't just start today, yesterday, or a few ago. So please consider going to patreon.com/politicsdoneright. Now, if you want to know if anybody who goes ahead and subscribe to the network right now, here are all the good deeds. How to Make America Utopia. What does that do for you? I'm writing that book right now. The first 2 chapters are done. I'm working on chapter 3. I'll post that. They're online each time I release a new chapter. But guess what's out there already? Politics Done As I See It, Class Warfare, the Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom. Again, that is As I See It, Class Warfare, the Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom. That is out there. You can read that online like right now. And of course, activists sometimes get into weight issues, and I have had weight issues all my life. I finally think I have it licked, the problem solved, and this is a procedure. I've given you all my tribulations, etc. in this book here, Lose Weight and Be Fit Now. You can get all of these things on Amazon.com as well. So consider getting Lose Weight and Be Fit Now, or subscribing to Politics Done Right. You have access to it fully as a subscriber at patreon.com/politicsdoneright. But again, you can purchase these guys at Amazon.com. And of course, we also have As I See It, Class Warfare, the Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom. And then we have How to Make America Utopia. Going back to my good old folks at YouTube, CP Elevated, the next recession is coming. Corporate debt is increasing. You're absolutely right. Let me tell you something else that's happening. The percentage, there are over 1 million Americans that are behind on their car notes. When you start getting behind on your car notes, that is indicative of you being behind on a whole lot of other things, including mortgages, rents, etc. So you are correct. While the economy, people like to say, is close to full employment, it's underpaid employment, which is a huge difference. Alan Parker says, the monopoly of the currency. Yes, correct, CP Elevated, the motive is profit. We need a system that moves beyond profit. CP Elevated, profit is, that's a different subject, right? Beyond profit, depending on how you define profit. I'd like to explore that. For folks who are listening, you can always call into the show as well. That number is 646-716-5812. Again, that is 646-716-5812. All right, let me get to the Facebook page to see if there's anything. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to the Facebook page from another page. Okay, just Maywood. Hello from Long Beach. Hi, Maywood. Hi, welcome aboard. Let's see what else I got here. Bring up that Facebook page here, see if I can see it. Sometimes Facebook is interesting because sometimes I can see some messages on the phone that I don't see on the computer. Some I see on the computer, I don't see on the phone. Some I see both places. Don't ask me. That's just how Facebook is. Okay, let's see. Mike Cisax. Egberto believes in the economic system that U.S. Native Americans live under that provides all that they need by the federal government. Of course, the vast majority of natives are dirt poor because they are dependent. Okay, let's qualify what dependency mean. Before the Westerners came to the land, right? It's quite interesting. They did just fine. They were well fed. They took care of themselves just fine. You guys considered them savages, right? But no, they were living in concert with the land. That they didn't have spears and that they didn't have guns and gunpowder and that sort of thing. I mean, does that really make you civilized? I mean, if they had, it is clear that every part of humanity has the intellect to build ships. They have the intellect to build guns or equipment to kill. Every sect of humanity, especially given that we all came from the same place, has that ability. That some decide to conquer and some decide not to should answer quite a bit of questions, okay? So please do not look at other civilizations and think because they may still be living like nomads and you're flying airplanes and driving cars that makes you better than them. It does not. It just means that you develop the technologies to do the things that you want to do. And what were the things that Westerners wanted to do? Conquer. And that's what they developed, the tools to conquer. But we have to remember that a lot of those tools that were developed to conquer was technologies for people that wanted to do other things. Let's say gunpowder from China. Let's say certain kind of navigations from places in Africa. Let's be clear on how things really work here. Unfortunately, very few people want to be honest with how things really, really work. Anyhow, folks, I'm isolating the MMT video, and I'm creating a standalone blog for that MMT video because what I want to do is I would like to get that guy critical mass. It is important that people start to understand MMT. I think the powers in both parties are scared to death that people really start to understand economics. Because if they do understand economics, they're going to wonder what took so long. Let's say I'm afraid we're going left. What do you think? I think Biden or Beto can win in the end. Manuel Herrera, let me tell you what I think. I think if Republicans want to elect somebody moderate, they'll re-elect Donald Trump. That is my honest answer. I think Donald Trump is on the path to re-election. Unless Americans see a completely different direction. When they saw Donald Trump, they saw a completely different direction. He didn't win. Hillary Clinton won with us pulling Hillary Clinton to the left. That is why Hillary Clinton won the 2016 race. Let's not make any bones about it. Hillary Clinton was the absolute winner. That we have a constitution that is fraudulent, that we have a constitution written by men who wanted to control the outcomes based on an easy way to win without the majority of the population, that's a different story. Now, if we really want to get the numbers that overcome the evil that is the Electoral College, we have to tell people what they give people the reason. We have to give people the reason to want to vote. And I did a video. Let me see if I have that video. Because if I have that video, I want to play that video. Because what happens here, my friends, what happens here is, let me play that socialist video that I did. I think that's the one I want to play. Let's see. Let me go ahead and play that one. Because here is the deal. A lot of people don't realize that they're scared that we're going too left. They're scared that people are going to call us socialists. We're going to go a little bit over, folks. Just a little bit over. We're going to go. But I want to play this for you. Check this out. Sally, come on in.
Hey, Egberto, how are you today?
Great. How are you doing today?
I'm hanging in there.
You keep hanging, Sally.
Day. I just want a little advice since you're such a strong activist on how do we work on demonizing that word socialist when we all benefit from socialist programs already existing in our country.
Let me tell you, first of all, I don't think we have to be concentrating on the work. You notice I did a show that was titled Democratic Socialism and all that kind of stuff, and it was just sort of to make it par for the course. But in my humble opinion, I don't want us to be going out there just talking socialism, using the word socialism necessarily, because I want people to understand what we want to do for them. right? Because what we want to do for them, yeah, a lot of it is going to be what you find in democratic socialism. But I don't want them to have to go look up socialism in the dictionary because it is mal-defined in the dictionary. I want them to know, if you elect a Democrat, if you elect a progressive right now, this is what they're going to be doing for you. And know what we are going to do for them. We are going to start supporting policies like Medicare for all. Everybody going to be better off. They're going to have more money in their pockets. They're going to be able to have better vacations. They're going to be able, we want to tell them those positive things. Republicans want to sit down and say socialism Venezuela, socialism Venezuela. They want to make that equation right there. What we want to do is be out there telling people, if you elect a progressive, this is what you get. And if then they start saying socialism, you say, well, if you want to call that socialism, I don't care what you call it. You don't fear what people are going to do for you. That's where I want people to be, Sally.
Okay, great. I really needed to hear that right now because every time I turn around, I'm seeing them, the Republicans throw out socialism like it's, something demonic.
Right, and it's not only Republicans, it is some Democrats doing it. Like I mentioned what happened on Morning Joe. The first question they asked the other day, Chuck Todd was about to go to commercials, right? Chuck Todd on MSNBC, and Chuck Todd, this is how he went to commercial. Well, I'm going to have to interrupt you guys right now because we have to go to commercials. We are capitalists around here. And I'm sitting down like, what are you trying to put in people's heads by saying that? Those are the cues that we're hearing from people. So
those are little seeds that are being planted.
Exactly. And what I was glad to see is the mayor of New York came on TV recently. De Blasio came on and he really hit it hard. When they said, are you a capitalist? He changed the question to tell them what he stood for. And I'm like, De Blasio, that's what I'm talking about. Gotta go, Sally. Thank you so kindly for calling in, my friend.
You have a great day. Great show as always.
Thank you. You take care now.
Okay, and that is what I am telling our Democrats and progressives right now. That is the message. Do not allow them to hijack the message. Do not allow them to tell you that somehow you're a socialist because you support MMT. Don't allow them to say you're a socialist because you support Medicare for all. Don't allow them to tell you you are socialist because you want to free kids from that ever-expanding debt that we placed on them because we removed the ability for them to get a good education. Lean in. They have stolen the future of the millennials. They have stolen the future of Gen Zs. They have stolen the future of many. We will not allow them to continue the theft. It is imperative that we get a spine. So to my brother who just said, don't you think Beto and Biden are the best choices to win because they are moderate? If they decide to say they will be moderate, in other words, if they decide to say we want to run on the Republican light agenda, one, if they make it through the Democratic primary, we will lose again. Americans, millennials, people that are hurting, want solutions. Progressives have the solutions. The Republican policies right now are a complete and utter theft of the resources of the country, both human and otherwise. The only way we move forward is with the progressive agenda, and we have a whole lot of topics to talk about that. So let's move forward. Let's not be cowered into believing that somehow the policies we support, the policies that Americans say that they want, is not the policy we aim to give them. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right. And you know how I end this baby. I am out. Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.